Hello, hello, beautiful people. We're back. My guest today is Simon Lovell, and Simon has a really interesting story. On the outside, he had everything. He had a mansion, he lived in California, he had a Ferrari, but the problem was that his relationships were a mess, and he knew how to self-sabotage himself like a pro. So he invested over $250,000 in personal development, and something was still wrong. But eventually he had a huge shift and an awakening, which we talked about in this conversation. And his life is completely different. He's flowing, he's in alignment. And we spoke about that. We also spoke about how quarantine affected his life and how it forced him to reconsider some of the things that he had previously never thought about. So this was a really fun, interesting conversation. I learned a ton. I think you will as well. And if you did learn something from this conversation or you enjoyed it, it would mean the world to me if you shared it with a friend, shared this episode with someone who you think would gain value from it. That would mean the world to me. So with all that being said, you can give me feedback for this episode directly at Hey Danny Miranda on Twitter, and I look forward to hearing from you. But until then, this is my episode and conversation with Simon Lovell.
Interesting people, thought-provoking conversations, nutrition for your brain. Journey through the minds of the world's top performers and discover what it really takes to achieve your highest version. This is the Danny Miranda Podcast.
What do you think we're going to talk about today?
I would hope that we're going to talk about helping people to become better and inspire ourselves so that we can impact the world, especially right now, because I think that a lot of people are actually hurting, even though they don't maybe want to admit that. And, even me having the tools and the investments that I've made in myself, like I've had to double and triple down on my own, mindset and emotional intelligence. So yeah.
I love how you brought up more recent times, because I think that it really triggered something in all of us, even if you have the tools. So I'm super curious, what is something that you've done differently after the pandemic started? Were there things that you had to revisit or things that were top of mind that you brought up?
Yeah, because especially in relationships, I lost a friendship because of what happened in COVID. Not a death, but just a difference in opinion, a difference in views, and that's okay. But it had to, force me to really look at my boundaries and how people interact with me. And I'm all for conscious conversation and conscious communication. And so that is about being able to be in a room with people that can have difference of opinion and not lose their shit. Does that make sense? And so I think that the trauma of COVID, which is, I'll define that for everyone, which is, a trauma is the interruption of energy. Things are going normally, energy is normal. We'll call it, use a traffic light system green, and then suddenly, boom, something changes that energy. That could be a car crash. It could be a divorce. It could be a bullying event. And so COVID was an interruption to a lot of people that they're still in that different state of mind because of it. And what it did and what it does to people is kind of bring up everything to the surface that's not been healed, right? It brings up everything to the surface and all the personality traits that were maybe suppressed, And so for me, it was about boundaries, and is always, but also about my own self-awareness around judgment, around like my views on masks, and then what, just noticing when I'm going outside. These types of conversations are really important for multiple, I wasn't really into politics, and then I suddenly started to go down different rabbit holes, and suddenly I found myself immersing myself in a lot of knowledge that I didn't already have, and so then I caught myself like spending a lot of time like watching the news, and then like really starting to notice how that was impacting my mindset. So for me, it was also about like taking myself back into my meditation even more deeply, and actually starting to like, really focus on what the opportunity was in the situation of what I could do to help with my skills versus being sucked into and staying in the mud of what was happening. But I also think that it's important for us to be aware of what's happening, but not stay in that energy too long so that it causes us to create new lifelong behaviors. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And I'm so happy you brought this up, because this is something that I had to go through as well. My whole thesis prior to COVID starting was that I don't need the news. I don't want to pay attention to it. I want to focus on myself. And once COVID hit, I was like, well, now I kind of need to be informed. And so how do you balance that need to be informed and also the wanting to work on yourself? Sometimes those can come against each other, but how do you balance those two?
I think the balance comes from being aware of what's happening in our body. We have something which is called emotional intelligence, which is very important, which is about how we understand our emotions and how it plays into our behavior. And then we have something which I call energetic intelligence, which is understanding the energy in our body and how that's impacting us. So I think the word balance needs to also be matched with a level of awareness of how am I feeling right now? Oh, I'm noticing that, when I'm watching this, it's almost like becoming detached, like you observe something, but you also notice the fact that, okay, now this is creating an energy in my body, and now I'm about to take an action. For someone who's angry, for example, there's different levels of anger. There's the unawareness of anger hitting and then a reaction in a maybe a thump or a shout or whatever. And then there's the anger coming up and the awareness of, oh, I noticed my anger and I see it. I see you. I feel you, but I'm choosing not to now react because of the anger. That's a different level of self-awareness that's active. So I think that going through the stages, COVID hits, suddenly we're immersing ourselves in all the different, views and we're now we're going through change. We're going through, and from some people being, forced into something that they're not used to, right? And so then, it forces you into that position of actually really looking at our behavior. Now, if you're in the place of completely unaware, then you're just going to be swept along, right, with what's happened without even any understanding. Like when I was in my drug days and alcohol days and just like my self-soothing addiction days, I called it the unaware stage of my life because I was just kind of taken along by the stream. I jumped in the water and then wherever I went, I was subject to the people that would influence me, the substances that were there. And, I wasn't really in control. But when you start to actually become more conscious, which is about going inward, what happens is you jump into that river, and you can actually then put your feet into the stones and stand up, and the water is going down beside you, but you're also present with the water, and you can actually decide to turn around and climb up onto the bank.
So you sound like a very self-aware guy. You sound like you're present and focused on the present moment, but you also just mentioned something where you weren't that way. It's not like you were born like this, it seems. So take us through that journey. I know it's a big question, but take us through how did you get from being in a place of addicted to drugs to a place of present moment focus, talking about the water and the stones? I mean, like, those are two different people. So yeah, take us through that journey.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So first of all, let me share my addiction pattern, and let me share, I think we all have addictions to some degree. I define it as something that we can't stop. And my addiction pattern was alcohol, smoking. So it would go from one to the other in this sequence. alcohol, smoking, drugs. This was ecstasy. This was cocaine. And then it was gambling. So I would basically start drinking. When I drank, I smoked. Then when the night went on, I would then go to clubs and I would take drugs. And then when I got back from the clubs, I would then go and gamble. Not healthy behavior when I wanted to be an entrepreneur, right? I didn't understand when I was in my addiction, which was just timeline. So I'm 41 now. I'm living in California, in Del Mar. I used to live in the UK. So this was around, 2010, around that time period. So I didn't understand at the time that my addiction was linked to my lack of connection with myself. Because when I had experienced bullying when I was young, I had bullying, first of all, from a teacher who basically sent me off into a room and said, watch the wallpaper fall off the wall, and shamed me in front of the other kids. And then I was bullied by boys at school. When you experience that type of trauma, what happens is you split yourself off from yourself to protect yourself. And so that lack of that protection led to a lack of connection from myself. And so then I went into a soothing pattern. So a trauma happens. We maybe didn't get the love that we needed when we were young. Now we're outed by other people. And now we go into this fight or flight energy. It's a survival energy and it's a protection energy. So then we're looking for anything to make ourselves feel normal. So that could be alcohol, it could be porn, it could be any number of things. It could be an addiction to something, it could be just a really negative behavior that continues. And so I got stuck into this cycle. Now, I was a personal trainer at the time. So by day, I'm helping people get fit. I actually have a published book with HarperCollins on, a diet. But by the weekends, I was a different man. I was living a double life. And so there's this part of me that presented myself away, and then there's a part of me behind the scenes, which is completely different. And so this is me out of alignment. People may have heard the term alignment. Well, now I'm living one way, but also there's, another person behind the scenes. So at the same time, I'm wanting to be successful. I'm wanting to make $1 million. I'm wanting to just do all these cool things and live this dream life and have freedom and all of the things that we desire. But there's also another part of me that's sabotaging myself. And so that's a very painful stage. And so it was 2010, and I'd been taking drugs the night before. This was it was a party. I was a DJ, it was Christmas Eve, and it was about 6 a.m. It was Christmas Day, and I had to be at my sister's house. So I got a taxi. Before I got the taxi, I looked into the mirror, and my eyes. And if you've ever taken drugs, you'll know what this is like: bloodshot eyes, sweat dripping down the face, just in that place of, paranoia, which happens when you take drugs for a long period of time. You become dependent, and then you also become paranoid because you're disconnected from yourself. You're basically, you create this mental fog that, people are after you if they see you. It's very painful. Anyway, I go to my sister's house. I arrive at the door. She opens the door. I don't get eye contact with her. I'm just exhausted, honestly. I've just partied all night. And, my niece and my nephew and my family were there, and they wanted me to be present. They wanted me to be there, in the room. But I just couldn't do it. I just was in a place where I was and when you're a substance abuser, you don't, you selfishly do things. And, at that moment, I walked up the stairs. I can remember very clearly. I walked up the stairs. I got to the top of the stairs. I just heard everyone downstairs. And I was just I got to go to sleep. So I walked into my nephew's bedroom. And on the play sheets were Thomas the Tank Engine bed sheets. And it was a single bed. And I just got into bed. And I slept all the way through Christmas Day, through Christmas dinner. And I left that very awkward leaving. I drove back to the area that I was living in, Bath in the UK. This was in Exeter. And, that was a big turning point for me because, a penguin, can survive in the Antarctic, but you put that same penguin in the Sahara and it can't because its environment is not supportive to itself. And so I'm here. I'm someone that wants to grow. I'm someone that wants to have this big business, and I'm someone who wants to like be successful. But at the same time, my environment that I'm in, that I've put myself in internally and around me with the people around me. Now, it's not that these people are wrong, but it's just like it's not who I am. It's not who I want to be. And so I had to make a power move. And so I moved out of the area I was living in. I got an opportunity to live in a friend's house. And what this did, I moved a couple of hours away from the place that I was living. And that just gave me the space. It gave me the space for me to start to get myself back to myself. And so that really started a journey of like personal development and actually figuring out that I can change the way that I'm thinking. And then I got into things like meditation. For many people, I started to get into the apps like Calm and Headspace, and I started to realize that if I close my eyes and I can start to just feel a little bit better. And after investing in a mentor, it was $30,000 for the year. I was racked up with $50,000 worth of credit card debt. By the way, with nothing to show for it. I had about, it was about $7K left. He was $30,000 for the year. I paid down $5,000, and I never missed a payment for 2 years after that, because I was at the breaking point of I have to change. I have to make this work. And it was a commitment. It was a commitment from me personally of like, I got to do something now. Otherwise, I'm never going to get to where I want to be. I need guidance. I need to like strip my ego down. I need to actually just take it on the chin and say that I need to invest in myself versus spending money on myself, because there's a big difference between spending money and investing money, right? I need to start investing money in myself. I also need to start to listening to someone who's actually more conscious and more aware than me, that can challenge me on my BS and that can guide me to be a businessman. And the decision that I made, which comes back to your original question, which was I basically said to myself, and I started to learn, sales, and my, company went from 0 to $1 million in 18 months, and I started to make, a bunch more money. But while that sounds cool, I still had a lot of pain. So what I said to myself was, I'm going to reinvest 20% of what I make back into me, not the business, but me. So I signed up with Tony Robbins in his platinum program. I went to India with him. I did like all of the personal development courses, and I even certain things didn't quote unquote work. I was just on a mission. Like if I had a relationship issue, I would get help. It was just a commitment to be a better person. And what was interesting is the more that I worked on myself, the more that I stripped back the layers, the more that I went deeper within myself. What happened was that the business started to take off, because what happens is, when you've got fear in your nervous system and you're worried what people think, when you strip away that fear and that energy and you replace it with courage, the business started to take off. Like I didn't worry about what previous mentors that I'd hired would think about me. I wasn't worried. And so like I just went into massive action, because there's commitment and there's action, and they're two very different things. You can't have one or the other. In order to change and to grow, you have to have a commitment to get there. And then also you have to put in the action and actually do the work. And so that was what made the difference for me.
What a beautiful story, my man. Beautiful. I mean, it really shows the power of putting your money where your mouth is, and putting the money, you wanted the money to go into things that were going to benefit you, and so take me through that moment. So in doing research for this conversation, I went through your YouTube channel and just saw that you were investing in yourself. When was that decision, when you moved to your friend's house? What year was that?
That was, blimey, when was that? So the incident in the Christmas incident happened in 2010. So it would have been, a little bit after that when I moved. And then the investment started in 2013. And then I made my first $1 million in 2015. And I had $50,000 of debt with 7 credit cards racked up. And then 2 years later, I'd made my first $1 million, and then I moved to America because in order to move to the States, you need an E2 visa. And with that, you have to I had to invest $120,000.
So take us through then what happened in 2018 on a Facebook Live and connect those pieces for us on how that happened.
So in 2018 on the Facebook Live, I basically went through what's called a Kundalini spiritual awakening. And let me explain this to people and give some context. So I class an awakening as, when we shift our self-awareness and then when we, a layer gets removed. But this was like a major one. So if we've got our true self of who we really are, then we've got our false self of our ego. Now, that's not always bad, by the way. It gets us certain places. But for me, it was destructive because it was taking me on a really negative path. And so in 2018, in that moment, it was 11:59. I basically came home to myself because I'd basically stripped away a lot of the ego. I made some really big decisions. I decided to let go of the Ferrari and the big house that I was living in. But I also... a big part of that journey was the black ball work that I do, which was around talking around the shame and the embarrassment and the things from my past. And so by this point, I'd already invested $250,000 in personal growth. I'd done all the stuff, but there was, when I was still in the home in Carmel Valley, with the basketball court with a Ferrari outside, it just wasn't me. Now, I just want to preface here that having a Ferrari and having a big house, there's nothing wrong with it. But when you have it because you don't feel good enough and you're using it as validation, and so you're driving your car so that people look at you, that's very different from driving the car because you want it as a track car or you have a hobby for cars or, different reasons. And so I created this, I use this phrase, which was, I reached the height of my ego. And I got to this place where I was, coaching these personal trainers in this business. And I was like, where am I leading people to? That was the question I was asking myself. Like, I have all this stuff. I've built up all this, revenue. I've got these, this company. I've got all this stuff, and I'm like, but I'm not actually really happy. There's something up with me, and that's really frustrating when you've invested so much. And so the decision to move out of the house and actually do and connect with what my heart wanted. Have you ever been in a relationship and you're like, do you like this person? Do you like them? You just like, are they, do you think they're nice? And it's like, do you? It's kind of that it's kind of like, what do I want? Like, do I really want this? And I was wearing these watches, and what was so interesting, I was buying these $5,000 watches, and the more I grew spiritually, right? And I'd done ayahuasca and gone to Peru and done all this stuff. The more that I grew myself, like literally I'm not even joking, the watches got heavier on my wrist.
Wow.
They got heavier. Because it was like, this doesn't feel right to me. And so the more that I grew and evolved myself, the more all of this stuff just fell off. And that's what happens. That's basically, you grow yourself, you become a better person, you strip away the ego. And then if you've still got a business that's not in alignment, if you've still got a relationship that's not in alignment, if you've still got, you've got all of these things that are not in alignment, it's going to feel more and more and more and more off. And so if you've ever done personal work on yourself, you will know that some people end up falling away because you've outgrown them, and so you can also outgrow businesses. And that's what happened to me. I decided to let go of a business that I built up and it was earning me really decent money, but I just couldn't do it anymore. And it wasn't about the money. When you get to this point and it's like, I am actually just going to make these decisions and surrender to whatever the universe is going to deliver to me, but I'm just going to go on my gut here. Because when you actually tap into your heart, when you actually tap into your knowing, when you actually properly do the work and invest in yourself and you go deep and you do all of the work that you don't want to do, a big reason for people don't want to meditate is not because it's not because you don't have the time, it's not because you can't meditate, it's because when you close your freaking eyes, you don't like the stuff that's going to come up. That's the reason. That's the true reason. Your ego will tell you something else, but the true reason is people can't close their eyes because they don't want to be with themselves.
So from what I understand is you help people build up that muscle and build up their ability to meditate for longer amounts of time. And in one video I watched, you explain that, doing 10, 20-minute meditation is great, but can you get to 1 hour? Because that's when the real benefits are going to come in. And I've experienced this firsthand. I was doing 10 minutes, 20 minutes, and then I jumped up to an hour. And at first it was so hard, but then you get used to it and it becomes fun, and it allows you to grow in a different way than the 20-minute meditation ever did. So my question to you is, how do you get someone on that path, let's say if they'd never meditated, or if they're in that 20 minutes, to expand beyond to 1 hour?
Great question. Meditation is one part of my process. And the way that the brain works in terms of neuroplasticity, and also when it comes to meditation, is we need to create consistency. And so most people will never meditate that long in their lifetime. And I get people there in 6 weeks through a process, variation, and the streaks and the accountability. People, it's like the Navy SEALs of personal development, but that's one part of it. Now, what's interesting is that when you meditate consistently and you do different things in your meditation, I've used meditation to come up with $1 million ideas that have actually grown a $1 million company. Mm-hmm. I've used meditation to also use my intuition on whether to leave something or stay in something, and use meditation for creativity in different areas. So when you only use one discipline, you only get one benefit. And so what I'm doing is I'm bringing in the spiritual element as it plays into entrepreneurship with performance. That's what I'm doing, because the biggest challenge for entrepreneurs is lack of management of self, time management, focus, and also self-sabotage. So in stage 1, there are 10 minutes to 15 minutes. In stage 2, 20 minutes, and it phases up to the hour through different areas. And the breaking point is actually around the 30-minute mark, where you go from not wanting to wanting to. But meditation is, and I learned a lot when I was in India with Tony Robbins around energy specifically, because I worked with his energy worker and also just went a lot deeper. But when you get that deep into the subconscious, you're bringing up things, and you're bringing up things into the surface that you weren't aware of. And so we either have the things that we are aware of that we're not taking action on, or we have things that we're unaware of that are blocking us. Mm-hmm. And so basically, let's just say that I'm working with someone who's got anger. Well, if someone's had anger, and this is a true story, a guy, lawyer, 30 years of anger. Well, he's, maybe reacting to his family, and also it's impacting his business relationships because of how he's reacting with his client and, decision making. Well, that person might be aware of what's causing the anger, and so he's choosing not to deal with it, or doesn't want to get the help, or whatever reason. But in this case, he didn't know why, and that's very painful for a man, because you're reacting and you don't know why this is happening. So for him specifically, the reason why was because his dad left when he was young, and he'd never resolved that disappointment. He'd never resolved energetically. So what needs to happen to his nervous system is that, based on that event from the past around his dad leaving, his body needs to come back into relaxation. So with animals, for example, if you have a dog, you will know that your dog will occasionally shake itself. Well, if a dog gets attacked, then it will shake itself. It's shaking off the energy to reset, right? So that then the dog can just move on. Otherwise, it would just be around if it got attacked, it would just continue to walk around as an attacked dog. But as adults, we don't have those tools. When we're young and things happen in our childhood and things impact us, basically we get frozen and it stays with us. So many of us are adults still living as children. So what I'm doing is I'm basically stripping out all the weight and the blocks around self-sabotage, so that the entrepreneur, the CEO, most likely, the common times I'm working with CEOs, they can rise without the weights holding them down. Because this is what happens otherwise. When you've got subconscious weight, past stuff that's not been healed, issues with mother, issues with father, issues with just past betrayal, all of that weight is still it's still there. And so then we try and compensate, we try and move forward, and it becomes very difficult. And that's why a lot of people get burnt out. And so for me, I think that there's actually a really big issue with the word high performance, because why is it that we have people who are high performers that then commit suicide? It's because they're not connected with themselves, and the love isn't within. They may be acquiring things financially. They may have success. They may have the significance from other people, around them. But ultimately, there's something missing within. And so what I'm doing over this period is actually creating this patience, creating this energy of calm confidence, and then also bringing in different exercises and routines and shifting their belief system so it changes behavior. Now, if you don't do that consistently, the brain won't rewire. And so that's why for a lot of people, they've done things, but it hasn't stuck. The way that we get it to stick is through the consistency, through the discipline. And then what happens is you start to feel over a continued period of time how you can feel versus how you feel now. And now you have that comparison. And now you don't want to go back to that. That's very much like if you're an entrepreneur and you've broken through 10,000 a month, you will know that it's very hard to go back because mentally you set yourself at a different thermostat point. Well, it's the same for how we feel. When we shift, when I create that consistency over a 6-week period, and there's accountability, and you can be exited from the program if you don't do the work, and there's a locking system in place. When you've done that for a certain period of time, you don't want to go back to who you were. So you're actually creating a new version of yourself, and that's how we evolve, right? So it's done through layers, but it's deep, it's deep work, and it's very transformational. So yeah.
It's like when you work out, you then have a new baseline for what yourself is and what you will accept for yourself. And then you stop working out and you're like, wow, I feel off. I feel wrong. And it's the same thing with meditation. I think what was the game changer for me personally was when I started viewing meditation as a workout for my brain, and that it was a muscle that could increase, and that I could have more presence. I could have more patience. And is that kind of how you think of it, as with your background in fitness?
I like that, and I want to use what you said about the gym in terms of like alcohol. For example, I don't drink, and last night I had people around, and there was non-alcoholic, alcoholic kind of drink, but I'm not battling with not drinking. It's not who I am.
Yep.
So you would have someone who drinks, and then you would have someone that's trying to give up, right? And going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And then you have someone that doesn't drink, and it's like, that's who they are. I'm not trying to, I don't need to resist against going back. That's when you do the work, you become a different person. You're in a new body, basically. You've stripped away all of that stuff because you've created that discipline, and you've actually rewired your brain. And in order to get to the next level, by the way, financially, a lot of people get blocked financially at certain levels, certain like money blocks. Those blocks and those jumps don't just come from like running another freaking funnel, right? They can't happen if someone's basically, making money, but then just spending it all because they really don't feel good enough with it. So, a lot of the financial breakthroughs, come from us, rewiring who we are, because what got you here won't get you there. I often say to people, if I gave you the business of your dreams right now, would you be able to handle it emotionally? And the honest answer is no.
Mm-hmm. It reminds me of Gay Hendricks and what he talks about, the upper limit problem.
Yeah.
And Gay Hendricks was on this podcast recently, and this episode probably was published before this, and you can go back and check that out. It's like, it is so important that we can place limits on ourselves, right? We can place limits on our own happiness and success. And if we don't identify where those limits are, we're never going to be able to go past them and get new levels of happiness, get new levels of abundance and success, right?
Well, you and I will be here in a year, maybe not having this conversation, but you most likely, if you're into growth like I am, we will look back and we will go, I can't believe that I felt that way because I thought that I felt my best. Mm-hmm. That's the way it works, And so if we always just commit to being the best that we can be, and when we react in a certain way, we own it, it's like when we're stubborn, we say sorry. Some of the simplest things to be able to bring yourself into alignment is to feel it and say it. versus feel it and punish people. And I think that's what people are doing during this time, sadly, is they're punishing people. They're punishing people because they don't agree with them, you know? And so part of integrity with self, part of self-respect, right, is about feel and say. And the reason why we don't feel and say, by the way, we don't feel it in our body and then express it, is because we've been shut down in the past. And so one of the biggest questions I have, which really helps shift a lot of people, which is, when was the first time that you didn't speak up for yourself?
That's powerful. And, I think we can tell naturally, right? When someone is feeling something and speaking it out, something in us, or at least in me, says, wow, that person, they're expressing themselves authentically, or it attracts you to that person. And you're like, what is different about them? I'll never forget when I went through Mike Posner. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but I went through his album, and I went through just him talking, and I was like, what is different about that guy? Why is he, saying it? Something's different. I couldn't tell what it was, but looking back, he was doing exactly what you're talking about, just expressing himself authentically, feeling something and then saying it. And when we don't have that, it makes us want that, right? And it gives us a guide for, that is something that I should aim for in the future, at least personally, I guess.
Yeah, I think it really limits people, and that's actually about the energy center of the throat. We have these different energy centers in the body, and one simple thing that you can do is, the next time you feel hurt and you feel like you're off, like we all need to know where our frequency is. We all need to attune to our own frequency and know, like, this is the energy where I'm at my best. So when we're not at our best and we're feeling off, and you feel maybe sad, or you feel hurt, or you feel overwhelmed, that is going to reflect in an area of the body, right? So for example, if you've gone through a breakup, you're going to feel it in your chest, you're going to feel it in your heart, because you start to close down. So when you're not feeling at your best, your body is telling you where to be present with, right? So let's just say I've gone through a breakup and I feel it in my heart, and it hurts there. What really my heart is saying to me is, Simon, go close your eyes and be present with my heart, right? Or you feel it in your stomach. It's like, close your eyes and go be present with your stomach. And you're being present with that energy because it needs to move, right? It needs to move around. So, all of these things play into what we're talking about here, self-sabotage, right? Not taking the moves that we know that we should make because maybe we're a fear, worrying what quote unquote people think. By the way, when you worry what quote unquote people think, it's never people. It's typically a person, someone from your past, like, a teacher, a mentor, a friend, a family member. So we create this blanket statement of I worry what people think, but it's actually, when we drill it down, it's because if that person sees it, then we won't like how that feels.
Do you think, going back to identifying the awareness of different body parts, do you think when we identify the awareness of something, it then releases us from that feeling or emotion, or helps us work through it, just the awareness itself?
Yeah. It's just bringing you back to you, because in those moments when we're something happens and it shakes us and it sends us off of our center, that awareness is come back to yourself. You've kind of, it's like, you've unplugged yourself. The Tesla has unplugged itself. You need to plug the energy back in, got to think of yourself as a Tesla.
You're talking about energy a lot, right? And what would Simon of 2010 say about all your talk about energy, and how would you explain energy to him?
That's a really great question. Energy is your life force. It's what manifests. It's what brings things into your reality. This is not just about going to the gym and like getting your energy levels up. It's about you being at your best, because when energy is in motion, when you've got full energy in your body, right? When you've cleared everything out, that energy impacts the way that you think. And the way that I would explain it to him is, I would say, Simon, think about the last time when you were sick. Were you thinking really positive things, or were you thinking like negative things? Well, when the body is sick and it's in survival, right, then what happens to, thoughts, they go negative. So the more energy that we can bring into our body, and this is, not just through things like exercise, but gratitude and meditation and being around the right people, and like just lots of multiple factors, like being connected with yourself. The more energy rich you are, okay, the more that you're going to be alive. And that aliveness is the smile on your face. That aliveness is fun, that you're happy. And when we're happy, we don't put people down. Hurt people, right? So any time that someone's like putting someone down or they're negative, I want you to see, right, I'm talking to him, I want you to see that their energy is low. There's something going on which has rocked them, and they've not reset themselves. It's like the computer has got the virus, and suddenly the virus came in, but they didn't reset. So I want you to see yourself as a battery, because most people, the reality, especially entrepreneurs, right, are really operating on a very low energy, but they think that they're operating on a high energy, and that's the illusion.
That's powerful. And I believe personally, when we have high energy, we are then, the universe works in such mysterious ways, because then you have synchronicities happen, and you have, the craziest coincidences occur.
Correct.
And
Correct.
So talk to me about one of those coincidences with Abraham Hicks and that video that blew my mind.
You have done some research.
Yeah, and talk about, I guess, other synchronicities as well, if you can recall.
Well, first of all, synchronicity is going to happen in an energy where you feel that they're going to happen. A synchronicity is not going to happen if you don't believe in it, just like you won't change if you don't believe you can. So, I've had so many different like spooky events that happen, but you get to a point where you're like, this is crazy, this is weird, but it's not weird because now I'm just used to it.
Yep.
And so what happened was I'd come back to San Diego. I had moved to Florida. I'd come back and I was doing a training, and I'd been in the hot seat with Abraham Hicks. So if anyone, just so anyone knows, I don't know if you've educated your readers on this previously, but think of law of attraction. It's the originator of the law of attraction. It's the secret, all of that stuff, right? So Abraham Hicks, you go in the books like The Vortex, stuff like that, very cool. So anyway, I get back from Florida, and I'm like, do you know what? I sat in the hot seat, and I got that recording of Abraham Hicks. I would really love that, but I moved house and I threw loads of stuff away. They put it on a CD, I didn't get it on MP3, and I just lost the recording. And I was like, I really would have loved that audio of me back in 2016. In fact, it was a year after I moved to the States, I was going through and I was watching some YouTube videos on playlists. So you just play from one to the other, and I was listening to some Abraham just while I was lying in bed in an Airbnb, because I was just in a transition from coming back from Florida, and suddenly I heard my voice. And this was 2 or 3 days later after I'd had that thought around, wouldn't it be awesome if I had that audio. Now, bearing in mind, there are thousands, tens of thousands, if not more, of these videos of like Abraham clips on YouTube. And then 3 days later, I hear my voice, and there it was. It was the audio of me on stage in 2016. And then that was the moment that I went, this is really weird, but also it's not.
Why do you think synchronicities like that happen? Because it blows my mind, and the ones that have happened in my life have always been when I've been meditating consistently, when I've been feeling good, feeling happy, feeling the life has been flowing it's the phrase I like to use. Why do you think these synchronicities happen?
Well, they happen because there's the physical world, and then there's the non-physical, right, which is energy. So there's energy everywhere. You could walk over a bridge and then suddenly get a thought around jumping off it, but it's not your thought. I mean, that's a bit harsh, but it's true. So we pick up energy in different places. We have to be aware of that. So it happens because these different points were basically tapped into this energy field. And that's why, for example, you'll suddenly think about someone and they'll call you because there's a frequency. And if you're connected at that same frequency, then you will attract people. Like, people have to understand, like there's a reason why someone has found this podcast, and for whatever reason, there's something that you and I have said, and it's what they need in this moment. We have to think about resonance. That's important when you listen to education and when you listen to information. You want to notice what shifts your body. Whenever I write a book or I do a training, I'm always saying this, which is basically notice what happens in your body and notice what happens in that frequency. So then if we set intention from a different energy, right, then we start to manifest. So this is why, for example, when you're in the shower, you'll get a lot of ideas because the shower brings you into the present moment. And then that water's on your head, you let go, and then suddenly, boom, the ideas come. Now, often people have the question and they'll ask me, Simon, I have so many ideas, which ones do I take action on? The ones to take notice of are the ones that come from nowhere. They come indirectly, they come very fast, there's no emotion attached, and basically notice what happens to your body. If it lights you up, it makes you feel good, it's probably a signal to take action. So synchronicities will happen when you focus on synchronicities. You're in the frequency, and also you also need to surrender not to timing. One of the biggest things for an entrepreneur, CEO, or people who want to be successful is impatience, because people want to say, I want this now, give it to me now, I set this time frame now. The universe doesn't work like that. The universe works, you set an intention, then you have to surrender. And if you just become anxious because you're not getting it, it's because it doesn't meet your expectations. The other principle which I have is called the universal slap. And that principle is, your body, if you're anxious, if you're depressed, if you're worried, and this is a behavior for you, then, the universal slap is the little reminder with anxiety, with fear, that you're not in tune, you're not in alignment. You need to take a new direction. You need to take a new thought. You need to redirect your thoughts. And when you redirect your thoughts, you're going to feel different.
What can someone do who's listening to be more in alignment?
That's a great question. So to be in more alignment, the first thing to do is to be silent, right? Is to connect with yourself, is to find your frequency, to find that energy where you're alive. That's for me the first key that I do every morning. When I'm working with clients in my 6-week program, for example, they have to do this every day, and connect with themselves, because otherwise we're off, right? So think about it. If you get up and you don't start your day connected with yourself, then it's going to impact your decisions. It's going to impact what you do. It's going to impact whether you overthink that Facebook post. It's going to impact what you write in copy if you're a marketer. It's going to impact if you're on an enrollment sales call, whether you are, just panicking because your money's low or whatever. So coming into alignment, first of all, is about connecting yourself, and then also really starting to really sense and feel. When you meditate, and you can do this as a test. When you meditate for a certain period of time, you're going to become more attuned to noises, to things around you, and then you just want to wait. You want to just wait until suddenly there's a signal to do something. I have a principle called KEIs, which is key emotional indicators. Ground yourself, bring yourself into the best possible place that you can within you, and then when you feel good, right, when you're feeling at your best, go about your day very slowly, be very present, and then just notice the subtleties that take you off and out of alignment, right? It might be a Facebook post. It might be a conversation with a family member. It might be any number of things. But you want to notice what takes you out of alignment, and then also what brings you back into alignment. Really, alignment is just that. It's almost, just see it as you, I use this kind of analogy, which is, again, using the river. Imagine you're on a raft and you're going down the river, and this is you in alignment. You're in flow with the river. You're in flow with life force. You're in flow in that momentum. But then suddenly you decide, or someone prods you or knocks you up the wrong way. They nudge you out of the raft, and now you're going against the stream, right? You're up against the stream. This is heavy. This is like, it's just a pain, right? You just got out of alignment. So you need to get back into going down the river again. And the way that we're going to do that is to get back into a different thought pattern, seeing things from a different perspective. I had a CEO, very successful CEO, message me the other day because I, give certain types of clients, access to me. And, he messages me and then I remind him of something, which is just a different perspective. And then it brings him back into alignment. I need to do that a certain period of time with someone until they can do it themselves, right? It's just like riding a bike. If you're helping a kid to ride a bike, then you're going to help them and they're going to fall and they're going to fall. And until it becomes a natural way of being. And so alignment, most people don't know how to get into alignment, and so sometimes we need a little help. We need people to help us to become more aware. And especially in things like relationships, you can do that with a partner. You can say, the next time I'm not being present, can you let me know in a kind way? Not like, hey, you're not being present with me, which that energy is going to shut down somebody, but actually kind of a conscious conversation and say, hey, listen, I notice that sometimes I'm not being present with you. I don't like that as a behavior within myself. The next time I do that, just know that I'm just probably thinking about work. I've just got stuff going on. I just need you to just tap me on the shoulder, look me in the eyes and say, I love you. Hey, I just need you to hear me right now. And if you say it in this tone, I want to be present with you. That is about conscious communication. And that is about how to be in alignment in a relationship.
It reminds me of just acting with love and thinking in love. How can I treat this situation with more love? And I think that is a good tool for acting in alignment. Are you acting with love in this moment? Yes, then you're probably acting in alignment. Is that accurate from your point of view?
If you're in fear, you're not in love.
Yeah, it's impossible to be in fear and love at the same time.
Yeah, in fact, I have a reference. If people go to simonlovell.com/emotions, there's an emotional wheel there, and what you can do, I'd suggest doing, is just picking like where you are at most of the time on that emotional wheel, right? So if we're in, for example, fear, then we're not going to be in a place of courage, right? So once we identify where we sit in our home, then we can identify what do we need to rewire to be able to be in, for example, acceptance or to feel free the majority of the time. Evolution of ourselves is not that we're going to be perfect ever. I'm not perfect, but I've changed behaviors so that I don't go there for as long. For example, I love that earlier you were saying, how would you talk to the 10-year-old version, Simon 10 years ago? Well, the Simon 10 years ago, if, for example, something happened where he's enrolling a client and they said no, like he would be down for days because it's triggered his fear of rejection. Does that make sense? But the evolved version is going to be in surrender. So, but that's just a level, right? Now I just have a completely different mindset around sales, enrollment, all of that things. It's conscious business versus like ego-based business, but you can use that in any different area, anger, or in a relationship, in so many different areas. Because what I don't want is for people to listen and go and to think, oh, well, he's perfect, right? Or that anyone else. You don't want to be in that superior or inferior position. I don't ever want to be and feel superior to somebody. I've got something to learn from everybody. It's just that I'm maybe ahead in certain areas, and being ahead in that area helps me to help someone to perform better, to grow their business, to be able to, and honestly, a lot of the times the byproduct of what I do is better relationships, people reconnecting with family members, like more present in their relationships. So yeah.
It's the difference of viewing things from a hierarchical relationship, which is how I personally always used to look at things like, oh, this person's above me or this person's below me, to now thinking more in terms of peer relationships, which is like, oh, this person is my equal, this person my equal, everyone is my equal. And yes, some people can help me in certain ways, but that doesn't make them above them on the totem pole of life, right? So I think that's a very important shift.
I think I love this topic, and I think it's powerful because I think I spent so many of my years comparing myself to other people. And I think that we should be inspired by people. But if you don't know that person, you're probably creating a massive illusion on who you think you are. And I can tell you now, I know a lot of people, they're not who they say they are. So then we can see we can create this vision of this person and put them on a pedestal. And for what? You don't actually know who they are. If you knew their life, you may come to realize that the very thing within them, which is, that you have, and the very thing that they want. And a lot of the time, I know for a lot of people, it becomes financial. Well, that person has this and that person has that. The bottom line, though, is that you can really attract people to your persona. When your ego is very active and you show up in a certain way, a lot of people say, I attract these clients. Well, you did that because of how you showed up. If you want to have great clients and people who are, conscious and people who treat you well and respect you, then we have to be congruent with ourselves and be authentic. And I thought that I was being authentic for many years, but I wasn't.
And it was just based on doing that work that made you realize that you weren't being authentic. Like, how do you get to that point?
It's like I think it's just a reality check. It's the ability to want to, and still, despite all the work that I've done, not get to a point where I say that I have all the answers. It's about like really allowing people to give honest feedback, and always understand that we have blind spots. One of the other things too, which I just want to say, which is like the personal work. A lot of people, they don't invest in themselves because they don't think it's tangible, but they don't understand the byproduct when you become a better human being, what you actually attract when you generate that energy. For example, when you become a better person and you value yourself much more deeply, then you will be okay with attracting clients who are at a very different level. Right. And so it has an impact financially, which then you can use for good and giving back. For example, I never used to give back, but now I have myself and my clients give away to, different charities, to different types of things. But when we're all about self, when I was in the stage of my life where it was all about me, what can I accumulate? Then I never did that. So I think it's important for us to understand like the importance and the actual real reality when we really do that work and we make that commitment to be the best that we can be. Because in talking to you as well, like I just know from speaking to you for this amount of time who you are, like the types of relationships and the types of people that you're going to attract into your life. It's just it's obvious, but also at the same time, I have to always, I can never say that I don't have blind spots. I of course I do, but as soon as I become aware of those, I then get a choice of whether I want to make a change.
And we cannot possibly think that we ever have it all figured out, even if we're feeling good about ourselves, because then it leads us open to so many traps to fall into. And maybe that's what Simon of 2010 would have said, like, oh, I've got it all figured out. But the more you learn, there's so much more to learn.
What you're talking about. Yeah, man, that's all like kind of weird woo-woo stuff, God no,
Yeah, so before we wrap this conversation up, I'd love for you to talk a little bit about your book and why you wrote it and just explain it to people listening.
So the Black Bull book, came about through, again, a lot of pain. I was invited to some connection games events. If you ever get the chance to do, authentic connecting, it's very powerful because it basically, gets you to go deeper beyond surface level. So, normally we meet someone and we say, oh, what do you do? We kind of find out and qualify them through that question, and so I was invited to these connection games and I went along. There's about 15 people in the room. I was in Encinitas, California. And we started to play these games and, you would, if you and me were there, you would just go deeper than normal. I'd say what I appreciate about you and it would just be like much deeper than normal. Anyway, we went to play this game called Anybody Else. And in this game, you get into a circle and you step into the circle and you say, something like, I sabotage relationships, and because of that, I'm lonely. And then anyone else that feels the same way would step into the circle. And it's incredibly powerful because we often put ourselves in a mental box like we're the only person going through the problem, especially if you're introverted or class yourself or have the label of introvert. So a guy steps in and he says something. I've been through it, but I find myself frozen. I can't step in. Now, this is frustrating, because I've invested so much in myself. I'm like, I'm evolved. I should have been able to step in. I need to be able to do this. But also, it was for him. Like, I had the ability to help someone else and support him, but I couldn't. And that was painful. That was more painful for me. So anyway, I left the game and I said to my roommate at the time, there was this thing I couldn't step in for. I didn't tell her what it was. And we went on to play the final games. And the night was drawing to an end and I was getting more and more nervous. Is this thing going to come up? I'm just frustrated. And on the way to play the final game, we went over to the sofa and there was a black ball on the floor. It was a juggling ball, just a random juggling ball on the floor. I picked it up and it was in my hands. I was playing with it. We tend to have an outlet when we're thinking. So for some people it's smoking, for some people it's biting their nails, pulling their hair, whatever it is. When we think, sometimes we go to something. So when I was overthinking, this ball was juggling in my hands and I was rolling it around my hands. And we went to play the final game, Hot Seat. And in this game, you can ask mild, medium, or spicy questions. So, it's like me saying to you, just ask me a spicy question. You can ask me anything, right? And so then I sit in this hot seat and my heart is beating, like I'm sweating. And I'm like, I don't know what's going to come up. Like, what are the people going to ask me? And then my roommate at the time, she looks at me and she goes, so what was it that you didn't step into the circle for? And I was like, BITCH, and I sat there and my heart's pounding and I just said, when I was young, I had a sexual experience with another boy. And in that moment, this black ball that was in my hand launched itself energetically out of my hands and landed on the floor, and everyone's like present with this ball. And I just let go. I just spoken up about the thing that I didn't ever want to talk about, and it was for a couple of reasons. It was like conversations with my dad about certain things. And it was just like, this was like a heavy weight, and you could have asked me anything after that. And then I left that night and I was like, wow, this is deep work. I've got to do this again. And I brought it to, we call it the ranch. It was the last month in the house in the big mansion, and we got people onto the basketball court. We started to play it, and instead of people stepping in, I just stepped in and I owned it. And people started to come up to me after I told the black ball story, and they started to say to me and ask me the question, I have a black ball too. Can you help me? And people would tell me the things that they were going to take to their grave. And the turning point for me to write the book was very much a calling. Was a girl had been sexually assaulted at gunpoint in South Africa with her boyfriend in a car. And it was a very, bad experience for her. But she'd only told people like one layer of it. And I created the space for her to be able to express herself fully. It's part of the work I do in my super high performance formula. It's called the Black Ball Games, and she fully expressed herself around what happened, and she healed 30 years of like blushing, because anytime that she went to speak up, her face would go blood red, and in fact she didn't dye her hair because of that. And so the Black Ball became a process and a book. And it's probably like my most transformational work, shame work and like shadow work around things that we've done in our past that we don't want to deal with.
Wow. I can't wait to dive deeper into the book, and I'm super excited for everyone listening to check it out themselves if they're interested. It's awesome. Thank you for what you do. Thank you for this conversation, Simon. And where can people find you if they want more Simon in their life?
Go to simonlovell.com/meditations, and I've put together some meditations specific to entrepreneurship. There's focus, there's manifesting money, there's calm CEO, all sorts. And then there's also, if you opt in for that too, you'll get a free copy of the Black Ball book, and also a free masterclass where I dive deeper into the neuroscience around meditation and really how to shift yourself, your emotional intelligence, all of these things to be able to help you to get to the next level.
Awesome. Everyone, check that out. And thank you for joining us today, Simon. That was my conversation with Simon Lovell. If you enjoyed this episode, or if you didn't, let me know on Twitter at HeyDannyMiranda. I'm looking forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you guys in the next episode. Peace.